Alright, so we're going to continue the process of rigging Lucario. So this time we're going to be rigging the fingers. So let's see how we're going to do this. There are several ways to rig fingers. And I'm just gonna go with this way I learned. It's actually a really cool way. It's the same way that Rigify rigs their fingers. This tour may be lengthy, but just trust me on this. So we're gonna select all of the joints here, all the three of them, not the four of them, not these three that are like the ones that are connected to the knuckles, the ones that are the actual finger ligaments themselves. And what we're going to do is we're going to go in our timeline here, in our animation timeline. We're going to start at frame 1. And if you don't know where that is, these are your frames right here. So make sure this is on 1. And what we're going to do is we're going to hit I, and we're going to insert a location keyframe. We're going to go to frame 20, and then we're going to go to we're going to change the pivot point to individual origins, and we're going to hit R to rotate, and we're going to rotate these up until they curl back like that. And we're going to hit I, and we're going to insert a rotation keyframe. So both of these have keyframes on them. Except I must have inserted the wrong keyframe the first time. So make sure in this frame, if you hit I, make sure it's a rotation keyframe, then go to frame 20. And then rotate them back. Then hit I for rotation. And then go to frame 40. And then hit Alt R. And then we're going to hit I. Rotation again. We're going to rotate them in this time, and then this time we're going to hit, whoops, okay, so then we have to go to frame 60, my bad. Go to frame 60, rotate them in this time. I'm going to hit I, rotation. So we have 4 frames here. In fact, what we can do, actually, we can, because we're gonna make this an action. But all right, no, we're good with this. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're going to change this to the dope sheet. So go where it says timeline, change the dope sheet, and we're going to change the dope sheet to the action editor, and we're going to name this action finger rotation. Oops, I said rotation, not rotation. Okay, and it says rotation. I can't spell it then, now can I? I'm sorry for this stupid flashing, but my computer's been busted up for a minute. That's 3D view, my bad. Go back to timeline. In fact, no, actually go back to the dope sheet. Save this, click the F button there, and then click the X. That basically just saved the animation. We can go back to it later. Now we're back in the timeline, and so wait, no, we're not. All over the place. There we go. Now we're back in the timeline. So now what we can do is we are going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to select this bone here. I'm going to hit Shift D, duplicate it, and I'm going to hit Control Alt S, scale that up. Control comma to add that back to the median point. Control Alt S, scale that up again. And I'm going to hit SX. Make that wide. And I'm going to move this out like so. I'm going to Shift D to duplicate this. Shift D to duplicate this. SY again, no, on the X to make that longer. And here we go. So now I'm going to select this bone. I'm going to go to the bone here. So here I'm going to name this pinky control .l. Whoops, my L key has been messing up too. Alright, and we're going to hit Control C over here and over here in these bones. I'm going to hit Control V, change that to R. Let me make sure my recorder is actually using the right microphone. It is not. I'm going to pause the recording and I'll be right back. Okay, now we're back. I'm going to go over here, select this bone, middle, finger, control, .L. Yeah, we see again my L key's messed up. There we go. Control C this. The names have to be the exact same on both sides or else the mirror won't work. And then we can Control V that. Change that to R. And I guess we can start from over here. Change that to, whoopsie daisy. Change that to pinky control .R this time because we started from over here. Oh wait, whoops, wrong name. This is the index control. So index finger control, whoops, okay, .R, and then we're going to Control C that name, go over here, select this bone, Control V. I'm going to change this to L. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're going to add an action constraint to these fingers here that will follow whatever action I link it to this bone. So I'm going to select this finger here. Well, no, I'm going to select this control here, and I'm going to shift select this finger here, Control Shift C, and go to Action. In my constraints menu, I'm going to choose the action finger rotation. I want it to happen on my X scale, and I want it to be in local space. I want the start frame to be at 1. So if I can type 1. Alright, my numpad, there we go. So 1, and I want the end frame to be at 30. Not 30. 20. Let's make the end frame 20. And now you have to play with the minimum and maximum. So make the minimum 2. Or I guess not 2. Okay, so let's make the minimum 0.5. And let's make the maximum 10. So now, whoops, when I scale this up, you see it starts to move. Well, you want it to happen the other way, so let's just say Alt S. and we need to up the constraints a little bit. So let's change this. Okay, so that's the alright, so that's the minimum. Let's change the minimum to -1. Or actually, we'll leave the minimum at 0. We want the maximum to be something like 70. I find that usually works. If I scale it on the X, it's interesting, nothing happens. If I scale it on the Y, okay, so we need to change this. We probably need to change the roll of this bone here. So what we need to do is tab into edit mode. We're going to go to our rig layers here. We're going to turn on axes. Now let's see exactly what axis. Okay, so this axis looks the same, except the okay. So the X scale is over here, and we don't want it to be like that. So, but what we need, so we need to change it to the Y scale. So, select this bone here and change the scale from X scale to Y scale. Now if I S on the Y, whoops. Now if I select this bone here, S on the Y axis, I mean on the X axis. There we go. The X axis. We scale it on the X axis, but the Y axis on the bone is right here. And so now we can, so let me just scale this up a little bit so that we can see the constraints starting to work. Now I can adjust the maximum to fit our needs better. Okay, so make the maximum 2. There we go. So Alt S to scale that back down to normal. So now we have to change the minimum. So make the minimum 1.3 and the maximum 2. So now when we hit SX to scale it up, you see that our finger is moving with it. So now we can constrain how we scale this to only the Y-axis. So we turned off, so the location on this was already turned off, and the rotation is already turned off, but we need to actually turn these on for future rigging. But we also need to constrain this to the Y-axis, so turn off the X and Z. So now when I hit SX, it only, in fact, if I just hit S, now it only scales on the Y-axis. Now we need to duplicate this constraint on the other bone. So with this bone still selected, select this bone, Control Shift C, action finger rotation, Y scale, local space, minimum is, let's see what the minimum was again so that we can get this right. Minimum was 1.3, the maximum was 2. So we can change that to 1.3 maximum. Actually, let's yeah, keep the maximum 2. Alright, so now when we scale this up, did we change it to local space? Alright, we didn't have a start and end frame, so we want this animation to start at frame 1, and we want it to end at frame 20. There we go. So now when we do that, you'll see that this finger starts to rotate with that. Like so. Okay. Now we want to again make the same constraint, so select this and then select this bone, Control Shift C, action, X location to Y rotation, no, Y scale, change that to local space, change the action to finger rotation, start frame 1, end at frame 20. We want the minimum to be 1.3, and we want the maximum to be 2. So now, when we scale this up, the fingers rotate accordingly. Okay, so now you know. So wait, but that's just the finger back action. Now we have to do it forward. Now, so that the fingers rotate downward. So we're gonna add another action constraint. So with this bone selected, shift select this one, Control Shift C, add another action constraint. We're gonna do the exact same credentials, Y scale to the finger rotation, except we're gonna have the start frame be 20, and actually we have to start frame at 40, and the end frame at 60. And we're going to make the minimum 1.3, maximum 2. So supposedly if I scale this in, that should work conversely with what we have. Right, I have to change this to local space. And so if I scale it out, that works. If I scale it in, it doesn't work. What if I change the minimum to a negative number or 0? Not 0. So let's change the minimum to 0.95. And let's see what happens when I scale it this time. Okay, there we go. But you see the problem. When I do that, it works, but then the other animation kicks in also. So we have to make it so that when I scale down, that animation works. But when I scale up, this animation works. So let me think. I think if we flipped, so let's change the minimum to 2, and let's change this to 0.95. I'm just going to see if this works. Okay, if I scale it up, this works, but if I scale it down, that one works. So let's select this again. Let's change the minimum . Okay. Back to that. Alright. If I scale it down, it works. If I scale it up, this one works. So let's put the maximum back up. And let's see what's going on here. If I scale that. Nope. The maximum has to be, I think, negative. Now let's try that. So it started to happen. So let's change the minimum. You have to really play with these numbers. In fact, I'm going to pause the recording and I'm going to get back to you once I figure it out. Alright, so I figured it out. Change this number to 1.05 and change this number to 0.3. And now you see, when I scale it in, it goes down. When I scale it out, it goes up. Alright, so we're going to duplicate this bone settings on the other bones. So, select this bone, shift select this bone, Control Shift C, action constraint, action finger rotation, Y scale, local space, start frame, 40. We're going to have the end frame at 60. We're going to have the, so let's look at this finger. We have the minimum at 1.05 and the maximum at 0.3. So select this and go to 1.05 at the maximum at 0.3. So now when I scale it down, you see that other finger follows. And then I scale it up, this constraint still works. So with this one, do the same thing, Control Shift C, action constraint, finger rotation, Y scale, local space, start frame 40, end frame 60. Minimum 1.05, maximum 0.3, and there we go. So by just scaling this, I can mimic the Rigify rig by making these simple constraints here. But I do have a suspicion on this constraint, on these upper constraint here. I actually might want to change the minimum just because it scales on it immediately rather than. Okay, that's better. I could change the maximum. Whoops. Change the maximum on this one to move it down. So, alright, so that's good. I think I made it slower a bit. Whoops. Okay, so let's see this. There we go. Alright, so now, since you know how to do this, I'm going to make a time lapse of me adding the constraints on here, and then that'll be it for this tutorial. So, go here. So there you go. All three fingers are rigged. So you see when we select each bone here, you see that the action constraints work accordingly. Now, sadly, there is no way to copy this over here. Like you could copy the bones, but that wouldn't copy the animation. So we actually have to make another animation and basically do all that on this side over again. I'm going to do that off screen because that's a lot of time and people are rushing me to finish my tutorial, so I'll leave you all with this. So you basically know how to do it with these fingers. Basically just copy this method and do it over here. And that'll be it for that part of the rigging. But the last thing we need to do though is we need to select these and then select this bone here and actually add a copy rotation constraint to it. So shift select that, Control C, copy rotation, and so now when I hit R to rotate, the bone follows, and if I scale it up and down, it'll do that animation for us. I just have to rotate it down and then scale it, and you can see that still works. To make that a bit better, we can actually change this and move it up to here. So we can do that for all these bones here. Move it up to that spot. Change this, move it up to this spot. And then basically at the same constraint. So select this, Control Shift C, copy rotation. Select this, Shift select this, Control Shift C, copy rotation. So now you can scale these down and then rotate the finger, and you can see you can easily curl up the fingers like so. So I'll scale that. So again, you're going to have to basically follow the tutorial for this side, but duplicate it on this side because I don't have enough time to show you. But the last thing we need to do is turn the deform off of these bones. Go to the doggy bone layer, and with these bones selected, just turn deform off. And then, now that that's done, the last step in this process is to select each of the bones that we have the constraints on and basically move them to another layer. So basically that layer. So now these fingers, you don't see them, but they still control what happens. So actually we'll move the unnecessary bones to another layer in another tutorial, but that's what we will end up doing. Alright, so thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next tutorial.